All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's that time. And thankfully, here's the thing. Last week, I thought we were going to get a chapter of My Hero Academia, and that turned out to not be the case. But thank God we have a chapter today, because I honestly want to see what happens after the news crew showed up and said, like, hey, we need this news footage about who wins or loses. The world needs to see this, because that way the entire world can be unified behind the results of everything that's happening here. Allie, good to see you. Hope I'm doing well. I'm always doing great. Can't complain. I don't have any reasons to. I hope all is doing well with you. Let's go ahead and get the formalities out of the way, shall we? Yo, peoples, Kyushu92 here, and welcome back to yet another live reading of My Hero Academia. As I said before the screen came on, last we left off, we pretty much showcased, we saw some of the other heroes, but we also saw some of the other news crews, and like the two helicopters that were flying in towards the area, where All For One and everyone else was going up against him, including Makia, who's rebelling against his master because his master, All For One, basically abandoned him. And Makia is completely free of Shinzo's brainwashing, but he's still going after All For One just because All For One just left him. So Shinzo himself says, like, even I can control the mind with my brainwashing, but it cannot control the heart. And in Makia's heart, he don't like All For One, because All For One just left him behind. But we also got the news crews who are making their way, like news reporters and everybody. A lot of people have basically abandoned their stations, but others bit my tongue. Others want to categorize this news as to what's about to happen, because this is important news that will unify the world, because it also shows images of different people from all over the world zoning in on the fight between Midoriya and Shigaraki, because La Brava basically hacked into the cameras and camera phones of basically anything that's nearby where Midoriya and Shigaraki are fighting. And the whole world is seeing the fight that will decide the fate of the world. Everyone is watching with bated breath. It doesn't matter who wins or lose. Everyone is going to see everyone is going to witness what's the end result of this good versus evil battle. But let's get started with today's chapter. Chapter 385, The Impulses of Youth. And it shows, is this the area where All For One is? Yes. It shows the area where All For One is, but it's kind of on the outskirts of a town, and so much is being ripped up and torn on the outskirts of that town, because that's where all the heroes have converged in order to make sure that All For One can't move. So you see tornadoes and giant wind tunnels that are in the air being whipped up in and everywhere, chunks of rock being thrown around, just dangerously close to this little rural neighborhood that's on the outskirts. And we have another panel here. Also, if you guys want to see what I'm reading, either go to Viz or Manga Plus. Viz is for those of you who want to, support the official release with, if you want to. That's just one thing you can do, but if you want to have access to it, then of course I got the membership thing, but if you don't want to do that, then Manga Plus is there, and it has all the chapters for you. So, just in case you guys want to see what I'm seeing, you can go to those places. But as I always say, support the official release. But in this image, we have towards the east, which is where Shigaraki is all the way, and moving down from the east where Shigaraki is at, we see Gigantomachia, Mount Lady, Tokoyami, Hawks, a few others, Yoarashi, and other Shiketsu backups, as they're all keeping All For One in place, because it shows you everything that's happening. So Shigaraki's all the way at the east, Mount Lady, Makia, Tokoyami, and all the other heroes are keeping All For One stuck there, completely stopping his advance. And then well past that, all the way back in the Gunga Mountains, is the remaining heroes and Shiketsu backup holding back Toga's doubles. That's what's currently going on right now. And we got Mount Lady, who's using all of her strength in order to, fight All For One. And she goes, this one's busted up too! Another one, rule! And then we have another one going, all that's left lying around is Detonarat stuff. Detonarat, which is, the company that was run by Redestro, back when he was the head of the Para-Liberation Army. All that's left lying around is Detonarat. I want to say Detonat, but it's not Detonarat. All that's left lying around is Detonarat stuff. Anything'll work. That pounds the demon lord to a pulp. And it shows Mount Lady, who's getting even more tired. Like she's tossing away, because Rule, I believe, has a quirk that can enlarge different objects, I think. And she's tossing them to Mount Lady. And Mount Lady has been using all these objects in order to keep All for One pinned down. She throws her big giant wrench away and gets like a big giant, what looks to be multi-pronged whip blade, something. But she brings it forward, but Mount Lady is incredibly tired. Like, she's covered in blood. She's got scratch marks. Her mask and costume is all tattered in different places. This is the battle to end all battles. You cannot get any grander than All for One and Shigaraki after this. So when all is said and done, I can't wait for them to get some rest. But she's wheezing and she's huffing real hard, and Tokoyami is wheezing and he's huffing real hard, and Hawks is there with them. Hey, I'm sorry that being your wingman is all I can do. Your support grants Baldur's Light more speed! And it shows Tokoyami and everyone else converging on this one spot where All for One is, and it shows Mount Lady preparing to smash in the location where All for One is. And then all of a sudden, the very object that Mount Lady was holding gets knocked out of her hands in a split second by a series of tendrils that pops out from the spot where All for One is. And it not only hit Mount Lady and knocked it out of her hands, but it also pretty much tore through her side as well. And she's just out. She's just knocked out. This big, massive tendril cuts through and then cuts through her side, rendering her unconscious. Hawks looks on in shock. Mineta looks on in shock. Huh? And then Mount Lady falls to a thud. And then everyone's screaming, Mount Lady! And then Makia's on the other end. And then something starts to crack underneath his feet. And a big, massive energy lash? I want to say energy lash. A big, massive lash pops up. And it cuts Makia across his own chest. And he falls backwards. And then we have All for One speaking, who apparently has been incredibly damaged, but he has I can't tell if this is his body regenerating or if it's his body slowly still rewinding. But he's there, and you see his skin, you see his body underneath, you see the muscles underneath, like genuine body muscles under his body as he goes, a dog that bites must be put down. Perhaps this is my other self's influence, but something dark brews within my core. The younger I revert, the more untamable it grows. And it shows All for One, whose body is basically as if his body was disintegrating. If you guys have seen Watchmen, and you've seen when Dr. Manhattan's intrinsic field gets ripped from him and his whole body looks like it's being ripped apart, All for One is unrecognizable. His body is just completely, it looks like it's disintegrating on the spot, like layer upon layer. And I don't know if that's the rewind effect, or if that's him, or if that's because of the amount of damage that all the heroes have inflicted on him. But sorry, eye is itching. But All for One says, the younger I revert, the more untamable it grows. And it shows All for One holding his hand up as this little ring of light goes behind his arm. Now, mind you, it goes behind his arm, but the ring of light pierces through his entire arm, and he just shoots through his own arm. It's not like he's also forming a blast in front of his hand, so he's combining even more quirks again, but it's not even like this ring of light is appearing in the palm of his hand, because that's an entirely different power. But this other ring of light just appears behind his shoulder, and he allows this beam to shoot completely through his arm. And in one shot, he shoots straight through Dark Shadow, and all of Dark Shadow's body dissipates because it's a massive blast of light, which is Dark Shadow's weakness. It's nighttime, and All For One just basically dissipated all of Dark Shadow, because Hawks is right there in front of Tokoyami, taking the brunt of this massive lightning blast that All For One just shot out.
The younger I revert, the more untamable it grows. And the more I give myself over to this darkness, the more I can draw on my quirk's latent potential. For instance, a cataclysmic blast of light.
And then, so here's the thing. My theory was that if All For One is getting younger, then maybe his control over his quirks would lessen, because his body is regressing, and therefore the ability to contain so many quirks within his body, within a body that's aging backwards, maybe wouldn't be feasible. But apparently, this idea has had the reverse effect. All For One is even more destructive younger than he was when he was older. He's just letting off his quirk's power with reckless abandon now, which makes him even more destructive, because beforehand, he had it refined to perfection, only destroying what he needed to or just to make a statement. But now, since his body is regressing backwards, and this impulse, this almost childlike impulse to just use all this power, he's now combining quirks in more devastating ways, because his inhibitions and sense of limitations has lessened along with his body.
And the more I give myself over to this darkness, the more I can draw on my quirk's latent potential. For instance, a cataclysmic blast of light,
which renders both Hawks and Tokoyami unconscious. "Tokoyami! Don't let up!" says Yorashi.
"Youth is a wondrous thing."
And then it cuts to dark. It cuts to everything dark. And it cuts to Tokoyami, who's just out on the ground. He's just unconscious. And All For One continues to speak.
"The boy pushed me to such lengths, so I'll be taking his quirk out of my way."
And it shows Hawks, who's right there being held up by the throat by All For One. A little bit of time pass, and All For One is trying to make his way over to Tokoyami to take his Dark Shadow quirk.
"The boy pushed me to such lengths, so I'll be taking his quirk out of my way."
But it shows that Hawks took one of his feather blades and is just stabbing All For One. Through the chest.
"You made a decent showing of it, Hawks. Fierce wings, a putrid, festering quirk factor. It's to your credit that you got this far using such garbage."
He's stealing Hawk's quirk, because the wings on Hawk's back are disappearing, but they're appearing on All For... He's stealing Hawk's quirk, because remember, he's got to be touching you to take your quirk. He's got Hawks by the throat and is just taking Hawks. He's just taking Hawks' quirk from him.
"Fierce wings, a putrid, festering quirk factor. It's to your credit that you got this far using such garbage."
And then Hawk speaks.
"So the quirks you stock work outside your body and don't mesh so well when you're rewinding, huh? Sucks to be you.
And then, here's the thing. While Hawks' blade is in All For One's shoulder, All For One, I don't know if he has a regeneration quirk in him, All For One just regenerates the blade out of his shoulder. He just moves it out of the way as it pushes its way out of his body.
All this damage is hastening the process.
Because that's what Hawks realizes. All this damage that they're doing to All For One is speeding up the rewind of his body. And before anything else happens, we see a little purple ball. I know it's purple because there's only one individual who has a purple ball that can stick to people. We see a little purple ball just stick to All For One. And All For One looks over. Stealing Dark Shadow for yourself is only going to turn you into a cringy edgelord. You want a real quirk? Take my pop-off instead. You'll get the thickest hairdo. Just don't take Dark Shadow from Tokoyami. And then Mineta, who's down and tired as well. Is still trying to fight because everyone who tried to step to All For One, they're all laying on the ground around him. All For One basically just bodied everyone because there was a fade to black when All For One said youth is a wondrous thing. There's a fade to black and you see... All right, there we go. But it faded to black, and there's blood all over the rocks. And it turns out that All For One basically just bodied everybody. And then Mineta's the only one who's still conscious because you see Mount Lady laid out. Everyone is laid out, and there's blood all over the landscape right now. But Mineta says, "You'll get the thickest hairdo. Just don't take Dark Shadow from Tokoyami." And then All For One just glares at him, doesn't say anything. And then he thinks to himself,
the braying howls of the weak, but every precious second counts now. Look there, a news chopper. Yes, let the people witness this carnage and lose faith in you all over again. You heroes couldn't protect a thing!
And then it shows All For One who's airborne, and he just tosses down the body of Hawks. And then Hawks gets back up. And then it cuts to that one dude from Shiketsu High who goes, "As the faction receiving refugees from UA, we were designated as a purely non-aggressive defensive force. However, the refugees have yet to arrive." And then Hawks says,
there's still a glimmer of hope.
And then it cuts to... an elevator that's in a subterranean evacuation system, UA Shiketsu route. And then it cuts to someone going, "Why aren't we moving? The lights went out. I'm scared." "Mom, sis, stay close to me." It's Natsu. It's Natsu with his sister and mom, Shoto's family. And then it cuts to him going, "Mom, sis, stay close to me." Then it cuts to the kindergartners that Bakugo and the rest of them had to do extracurricular activities with. It cuts to them going,
"Mount Lady and them got all beat up. Nonsense. It must be fake news."
And then it cuts to the people, all the civilians who are currently watching all this stuff going,
"This is messed up, man. We put our faith in them, and this is what we get."
See, this is the reason why civilians in this story upset me so, if you will. these people don't do anything to help the heroes whatsoever. They would just watch from the sidelines. And if the heroes don't do anything, then all hope is lost in their eyes. But the thing is, it's the heroes who are doing everything in their power to try and keep this dude from succeeding. But the minute things don't look good,
these civilized people, they'll eat each other. Like, it's like a bad joke. These civilized people, they'll eat each other. And just quit at the first sign of trouble.
And it's like, and then the same thing that they do for the heroes is all like,
but when they don't need you anymore, I'm paraphrasing, they'll cast you out. Like a leper.
That's just how these civilians behave. It's like, you'll see these people fighting for their lives, but as soon as they get knocked down, all you can think of is all like, we put our faith in them and this is what we get. Like, see, they don't need me in that room because I'm all like, well, then you go outside and try and save the world. These civilians, they don't know how much these heroes have actually sacrificed to even get this far.
This is messed up, man. We put our faith in them, and this is what we get?
Then we cut to Task Force HQ. No full damage report yet.
All for One is moving due east. This is looking bad. Aiba, give us an update.
I took back control of the evac system, so multiple blocks are on the move. But one of them's been stopped from inside. Someone's up to no good.
And then it cuts to someone. Then it cuts to someone who's on the inside going,
I know All for One told us to obey Skeptic's orders, but now we've lost contact. How can I produce results for All for One? By the end of today, the world will be his to command. Unless we contribute to his cause, we've got no future.
And this person starts charging up his fingers as if he's like a bomb or something. And then it cuts to one of the other heroes going, I found them all! And then the dude just, I guess, puts his fingers together, and I guess he blows up, because above the floor, where some other students are, such as Tetsu, it both looks like the ceiling gives way above, the girl, I forget her name. Her name is Kendo. Is her name Kendo? Someone will correct me. The girl that can make her hands really big. She's there, and Tetsu is there. The roof gives out all of a sudden, but before it can crush some civilians, the hero known as Death Arms shows up, and he saves these civilians before even Tetsu could show up. And then he speaks.
I know what lies ahead. We're gonna see history repeat itself. I know that, but even so, it's hard to explain.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. This is just like the first chapter of the story.
I know that, but even so, it's hard to explain.
He'll die for nothing. Does he have a death wish?
My body took action all on its own.
The same man, Death Arms, who was there presently when Midoriya had the same moment happen in the very first chapter. He experienced the same sensation, the same drive, as his body just instinctively went to save people, even though this man hung up his costume and gave up being a hero. His body would not let him, and therefore he just jumped into action without even thinking.
My body took action all on its own.
And then it cuts to the Kamino Ward. In Kamino Ward, and it cuts to Shoto and Ida, as he goes,
not yet. It's not over yet.
Because as this fighting is taking place, in the same area where Shoto and the rest of them are in the Camino Ward. You know, as we see that, we see the same location. We see Stain. We haven't seen Stain ever since he gave that information to All Might before all of this stuff went down. And that's the end of the chapter. So, yeah, things are bad. It's not over yet, but things are still bad because All For One has basically bodied everyone who chased after him. And if I come over here, it's still, dang it! It still doesn't have like the summary. But All For One basically bodied everyone, and it looks like he's basically just stolen Hawks' quirk. He's basically stolen Hawks' quirk. So now Hawks is kind of quirkless. Buckle up, this chapter is something else. I wonder if using multiple quirks at the same time so haphazardly means rewind is going to speed up. I believe so. Now, All For One says that since his body is rewinding, his inhibitions and I wonder what's going on with Aoyama too. We haven't seen Aoyama ever since we saw the matchups of different people against Tartarus members, different people against the main villains. We haven't seen Fat Gum and Aoyama since we saw them paired up against Tartarus prisoner Kuneda. We haven't seen Aoyama since. The fact that out of all the fights we keep going back to, we have never gone to Fat Gum and Aoyama. It's been months since I read that chapter where we last saw them. We haven't seen Fat Gum and Aoyama since then. It's been months. Where are they? What are they doing? So much time has passed with everyone else's fighting, but we've never cut to Fat Gum or Aoyama at all. It's been forever, Allie. But this chapter basically just makes everything seem even worse because All For One has basically rewound into a state where he's that's very suspicious. It is suspicious. We haven't seen either one of them in months. It's been months. It was sometime last year we last saw them. It is now April. It is now the middle of April. And we still haven't seen them. But just to go over what I think about this chapter, All For One, who we've seen be destructive beforehand, but he did it in a way that was methodical. Now we are dealing with an All For One whose body has rewound to the point where he feels no qualms about going overboard. He's just pretty much thrown method to out of the way. Any sort of control, like fine-tuned control, and he's just combining quirks in the most destructive way possible. Powerful enough to blast away an entirely full-powered Dark Shadow. Mind you, reminder, this is still all happening at night because you can see Dark Shadow get blasted away. And you see the night sky behind them with the stars in the background. The fact that All For One was able to blast away Dark Shadow while he was in his favorite space, in his most preferred space to be fully powered, and he just blasted away in an instant, it just shows you that All For One has I wouldn't even say he's reached a new level of power. This is All For One if he just does not care about how he uses his powers anymore. And then it fades to black, and All For One has basically bodied every single person. Mount Lady's out, everyone who was there. And that includes Makia, because Makia is not there. Makia is not standing. Mount Lady got her side torn into by one of his tendrils, and then Makia got whipped by some sort of energy lash quirk, and he got cut across the chest, and he was sent flying, and then everyone else got bodied by All For One after that. But we don't see anyone else standing, so whoever was there All for One basically just wiped the floor with all of them. And then he's using their unconscious, potentially on death's door bodies to show to the world, like, this is what happens. Let the world tremble in fear again, because this is how he still does mind games. Even rewinding, he still does mind games, because he knows that if people see all these heroes who have fought tooth and nail to bring this person down, if he knows that if people see them all just laid out before him, then that robs people of all hope. That robs people of all ideals that they'll be able to breathe into a nice, peaceful, all-for-one-less future. So he's using the fact that everyone is seeing this news. And it's already got people talking in the evacuation locations. Because, like I said, the civilians in this story really do get on my nerves. I don't care about the civilians whatsoever. Mainly the ones who aren't getting saved. The ones who are getting saved, some of them are incredibly appreciative. But the vast majority of them are so spoiled on being saved by heroes that they don't know how to act when the heroes lose. When the heroes are losing in the face of absolute uncertainty, they just got the mindset of blaming it on the heroes. That everything's is as bad as it is. Like, and it really rubbed me the wrong way when that one guy in the chapter says, like, we put our faith in them and this is what we get. Look, these people are trying their best. They're fighting an adversary that has been basically plaguing the world for over 100 years. Because All for One has been around since the very formation of Quirks. So he's been around. Ain't that crazy? Ain't that crazy that the Quirks... that the story of Quirks in and of itself happened before the timeline that everyone is alive in right now? Ain't that crazy? That's crazy how all the people we know right now in My Hero were born well after All for One, were born well after All for One has been a thing. That includes All Might, and I want to say Nana Shimura and possibly some of the successor as well. So All for One has been around for a hot minute. But the thing that really gets me about these civilians is, like, I understand being kind of distraught. It's human nature to feel things. Being kind of distraught that things are not going the way you think they should be going. But it's incredibly selfish of you to be all like, we put all this faith in you and you guys aren't doing your job and stopping this hero. Like, first, like I said before, and I'll say this many times, the heroes really don't owe these civilians anything, but they're doing this because it is the right thing to do and because it's the only way the people who are complaining about, oh, these heroes are not beating the villain, so they're not doing a good job, so why did we even waste time on them? These heroes are fighting so that you could complain about literally anything. Because if All for One wins, you will not live in a world of peace. You will not live in a world where nights could be guaranteed. You will not live in a world where you seeing your family the next day is a sure thing. These people don't really understand that. They're just right there in the moment. All they can really do is just watch. But it's incredibly frustrating seeing how these individuals still have not changed even after Uraraka gave them a pep talk and tried to make them see reason. Now, mind you, it's not everyone who thinks this way, but it's always that one person in the background that's all like, well, they're not really doing their job. So this is all we get just because we put faith in them to bring about the end of this war. And they failed. Excuse you, but last time I checked, whenever trouble came calling, you was either running or calling the police. You weren't trying to help out. You ain't in no evac centers helping nobody out. You're like this type of people that would pass Shigaraki on the street when he was younger. There's still so many civilians like that. So whenever I see civilians who are chastising the heroes who are basically getting bodied by an individual who does not care if everyone in the world lives or dies, I'm like, cut them some slack. These people had to endure bad press, people calling them fake, people calling them a waste of time, people pretty much berating them and being overall just sowing seeds of dissent and negativity to the point where other heroes just straight up quit because it was too much stress. Yet these same heroes are fighting for their very lives to ensure that you still have something you could possibly complain about the next day. So I honestly feel these civilians won't get better until they see All for One completely die or just completely defeated with no hope of ever messing with anyone ever again, before they take it upon themselves to be all like, okay, now everything's fine. I mean, only time will tell, but it's like every time I see, and I know I'm lumping in a lot of civilians when it's really just one, but it really does rub me the wrong way when I see people who risk their lives with no other reason other than to see people safe and to see the world safe and to usher in a new future where people can live in peace. It really rubs me the wrong way when people see that and still find reasons to complain about it. It just shows you how good the writing is when I can hate the civilians because they're stank. Now, mind you, not every civilian is this way, but it takes a really good amount of writing for me to just hate the civilians and society as a whole in a story. The mentality of people. It takes a really good story writer for me to see that and be all like, you know what? Yeah, that stank. I don't like that. I really can't stand that. And for me to be upset about it every single time that I see it. But going back to it, All for One basically bodies everyone. He steals Hawk's quirk and he tries to make his way to Tokoyami because he wants his quirk as well. And Mineta is pretty much the only person who's still conscious after all of this. But we don't see what happens to Mineta, but he's down and out and he's incredibly tired as well. And it just shows All for One flying in the air, and then we get news reports from the Task Force HQ that All for One is making his way towards Shigaraki. So presently, there is no one else who can currently stop All for One, because All for One basically just took everybody out. And then we got this one dude, the mole, who's inside of the evacuation place where all the civilians are at. He's trying to move of his own accord, saying like, on this day, All for One will have the whole world under his command. And it's like, why is there still more of you? Aren't you dead? Haven't you been arrested yet? And apparently he blows himself up while another hero tries to apprehend him. And then as the aftershocks of the explosion cause a roof to fall out, we see Death Arms just appear out of nowhere and instinctively go and save people. And he just responds the exact same way that Midoriya did when Midoriya saw Bakugo getting pulled in and held hostage by the slime heteromorph quirk user. So we just had a callback to the very first chapter of this series, literally 384 chapters later. So I like these callbacks. I like these callbacks to the very first chapter. But we got Shoto and Ida back in the Kamino Ward saying like it's not over yet. Because remember, everyone who was in the Kamino Ward, villain-wise, got teleported over to the Gunga Mountains. That includes Dabi, who's now confronting Endeavor right now. So Shoto and the rest of his crew got to make their way over to where everyone else is. Because he says it's not over yet. And from the outskirts of the Kamino Ward, we see Stain, and he's got his sword out. So I don't know what Stain is there, and he's about to do. I don't know what he's about to do. All I know is, with Stain's very unique sense of purpose, if he sees qualities of a true hero in an individual, that'll be reason enough for him to live, to let them live. But we're just going to have to see what the next chapter holds for us. It doesn't say that we're going on break. Yeah, that's the end of the chapter. It doesn't necessarily say that we're going on break after this chapter. Yeah, next 7 days. Doesn't say that we're going on break, but I can't wait to see where the story goes from here. I would love to see Rei, Natsuo, and Fuyumi use their ice powers. I mean, they got powers. They could be very helpful in, protecting people. Even though they're not fully licensed heroes, they could be helpful. All Might went somewhere too with the briefcase. We haven't seen All Might in a minute. We haven't seen Fat Gum in a minute, and we haven't seen Aoyama in a minute. There's a certain amount of people that have been left unaccounted for a long time. What's going on with Bakugo at the top of the UA Fortress? Is Ed Shot still working on him? What's happened to everyone up there? Because Shigaraki and Midoriya are no longer in the UA Fortress anymore, which means that gives everyone on the UA Fortress time to recover. Afternoon, Cdez. You came in right at the tail end of this stream. Sorry, buddy. I'll be doing Jujutsu Kaisen, but I gotta talk to my dad about something real quick. But there's still some people that are left unaccounted for. There's still elements of this war that we still need to check up on. But we're just gonna have to see in the next chapter. Sorry if I went on a little bit longer than normal. It's just that you guys know how I like to analyze these chapters. I'll be doing Jujutsu Kaisen next, but give me a little time to talk, and then we'll talk, and then we'll continue with Jujutsu, and then that'll be it for today. Back home in Texas. Welcome back to the United States, Cdez. Hope all went well for you in the Dominican Republic during your visit. But to everyone here, all I can say for right now is, hope you all enjoyed. Do you think All For One's going to take over Shigaraki again? Although Shigaraki wants to do this on his own, he'll attempt to, because he wants Shigaraki's body. But he wants Shigaraki, well, mainly he wants to implant more of his quirk factor into Shigaraki so that the All For One aspect that is in his original quirk that's in Shigaraki can fully take him over. Shigaraki is aware of this, but who knows what's gonna happen when All For One actually reaches them, if he reaches them. But we'll have to see. I gotta call it here. To everyone here, all I can say is, hope you all enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in my next video. And if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed what you saw here today, then like, subscribe, share this stream with everyone you know, because the more the merrier, and because it helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. And maybe even consider becoming a member, because I am always looking forward to entertaining you. Plus, it helps keep the lights on. So have a fantastic day, and once again, as always, later, peoples!